This episode is brought to you by Honda. Introducing the all-new, all-terrain Honda Passport Trail Sport, the most off-road capable Honda Passport Honda has ever dreamt up. The Passport features increased ground clearance, roof rails on all trims, and available specially developed all-terrain tires. And you'll stay comfortable with tri-zone climate control and available features like heated and ventilated front seats and a panoramic moonroof. Learn more at honda.com/passport.
Today on CityCast Madison. Welcome to the Friday News Roundup. We've got supper club drama, more local impacts by federal cuts, and yesterday marked the 10th anniversary of Tony Robinson Jr.'s death. It's Friday, March 7th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here is what Madison's talking about. Joining me today is the leader of this here podcast, our executive producer, Haley Sperling. Hey, Haley.
Hi, Bianca. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And Rob Thomas, our wonderful newsletter editor. How goes it, Rob?
It goes well, Bianca.
All right. Well, that's good because you're kicking us off this week.
I am. This is the story about Kavanaugh's Esquire Club, which is the oldest supper club in Madison, opened on North Sherman Avenue in 1947. And has had probably the wildest week it's ever had in the club's nearly 80 years of existence. So just to back up a little bit, it was opened by Jack Kavanaugh and has been in the family ever since. His son, John Kavanaugh, took over ownership and the family has run it. A very old school supper club, relish trays, old fashions, the stuff you want in a Wisconsin supper club. So last spring, John decided it was time for him to retire, and he was going to sell the business to Craig Spalding, although the Kavanaugh family was going to retain ownership of the building. And there was a lot of fanfare about this. Spalding was a bartender at the club at the time, and he also owned and operated the Cafe Momar, a favorite place of mine for many years.
R.I.P.
Yeah, right. It was damaged by fire in 2009. So Esquire Club seemed to be in good hands. But then last Friday, a sign appeared in the window which said, "Due to the unimaginable, the Esquire Supper Club is closed. We thank you for your dedication and support." The unimaginable.
It's wild.
It's just such a wild thing to say. Like immediately your mind starts turning. What could have happened that was unimaginable? What could you start trying to imagine it? And the other thing that's so wild is like it was closed, and like that was how employees found out that they were out of jobs, was they showed up and this sign was in the window saying the unimaginable had happened. Spalding later posted on social media the closing was due to operational and staffing issues, which is very imaginable in the restaurant business, which is so volatile, as you guys know.
Truly.
But then this is the plot twist, is that the Kavanaugh family has been so upset by this turn that John Kavanaugh, who's 75, decided to come out of retirement and take back and reopen the club. And there does not seem to be a lot of goodwill between the Kavanaugh family and Spalding. In an interview with Samara Kalk-Derby in the Wisconsin State Journal, Kavanaugh said he didn't like what Spalding had been doing with the club since he took it over. He was kind of moving it away from the traditional supper club vibe into more of like a nightclub. But the real issue was Kavanaugh said Spalding was behind in his rent and other bills and was not paying his employees on time. It was behind in paying his vendors. One employee has said on social media that Spalding owed his staff $80,000 in back pay.
Sheesh.
Yeah, and they've set up a GoFundMe to try and help with immediate and short-term bills for the staff. So the good news is that the Kavanaughs are reopening the Esquire Club. They say it should be open this weekend. So the relish trays and the old fashions will be served up once again. So just a very weird turn where like we lost like a Madison institution and now it seems back, and they're very dedicated to keeping it exactly as it was since 1947. So a strange story, happy ending, but drinks are on me, I guess.
Okay.
I'm getting whiplash, honestly, the back and forth. Because, yeah, like you said, Rob, like it was a huge story. The fact that it was closing, like we are losing this Madison institution. People were already, writing the obituary. And then suddenly it's like, whoa, hold up. Like, we're not closing. We're gonna run it back. Let's do it again. Bring it back in the family and come back into business. I haven't heard that tale before. So kind of an interesting plot twist here. I've been to Kavanaugh's a couple of times. Super fun, super cute. I do agree, though. I know when Spalding took it over, he was like, He initially said, he was like, I really want to keep the vibe and the aesthetic of the bar the same, or like of the club the same, but like bring it into the 21st century, replace the carpets and stuff. And I was on board with that because I was like, yeah, there are some places in this restaurant that really are showing its age, like really cracked bar stools, carpet that definitely needed some replacing, probably like a nice deep clean wouldn't hurt anyone. I'm curious to see how the reopening goes. I would definitely love to go back. The food was great, and always, I know it was like pretty solidly priced, for supper club fare. It's not like you're paying crazy amounts of money for anything, at least by my standard, I guess.
Yeah. A lot. I feel like they're like not in my name. Like it's got their family name on it. They're like, how about no? Like we're bringing this back to the original. We do not want to let this go. It also brings up for me the story around Rabinia Courtyard. Not saying these are related at all, but just kind of like, wait, you guys are closing, and to me, in some ways, what happened there is like it's the unimaginable. But just having that is such a dramatic sign. It's like from the 1880s, showing up to work, and it's like there's a sign. Like just like what is going on here? Like we have email, we have text.
I know. I mean, I remember sending the story in the Wisconsin State Journal, because I think they're the ones that broke it, like to my friends who I went to Kavanaugh's with, and I'm like, what do you think the unimaginable actually means? And I'm kind of bummed that it is very imaginable. Like this stuff happens all the time in the restaurant industry. Not paying your workers, unfortunately, happens all the time. I was picturing like something exploded, or I don't know, flying monkeys got loosed. Like that is unimaginable.
There's a pack of wild dogs. Something like that. Something's a little sexier than, we didn't pay our electric bills.
10 loose dogs, 50 wild boar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was thinking also the Ohio Tavern has had some ownership drama in the last few weeks as well that were reported on. But it's rare to see this kind of very public back and forth. I mean, the Kavanaughs were not happy and not shy about sharing it.
Oh, yeah.
Kavanaugh's daughter was blistering on Facebook about how Craig Spalding had managed it. So super interesting. A happy ending, looks like. So all is well that ends well.
Yeah. And we're going to actually turn to another story about people who are blistering over how people are managing things more at the federal government. But before we dive into that news, let's take a quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
We've been talking on the podcast lately about how cuts to the federal workforce and federal agency budgets are impacting us here in Wisconsin. I just want to shout out really quick for folks. If you haven't heard our episode from this week with the director of the Wisconsin Institute of Discovery, Dr. Joe Handelsman, and the co-president of the Graduate Union at UW-Madison, Madeline Toff, on the NIH funding cuts, definitely do. Find it in our feed or linked in our show notes. But there's already some more news of the federal government's Department of Government Efficiency trying to make savings here in Wisconsin. This time it's via closing federal buildings. We might have heard about one that was going to happen. Now we know at least 4 in Madison are on the chopping block, and 16 total in the state of Wisconsin. Here in Madison, some of those offices include the Federal Highway Administration Office, which has about 30 employees, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, and some smaller business offices. Just for reference, some bigger ones in the state include Bureau of Indian Affairs Office in Ashland, Social Security Office in Wausau, IRS Office in La Crosse, and there's a host of other ones. So according to WKOW News, DOJ is claiming to save $5.5 million in Wisconsin with this work. So There's some unhappy people on the receiving end of those cuts. And, another move around federal cuts is with foreign aid. So I just feel like bringing up, too, this past Saturday, there was a protest at the state capitol in solidarity with Ukraine. Some of y'all might have been there. It was about 100 or so people who came out on the cold day, in part to protest the changing narrative around Ukraine that the president has engaged in, kind of saying things like Ukraine's provoked the Russian invasion and calling Ukraine's president Zelensky a dictator. Donald Trump also, in an early executive order, suspended a program that helped people in Ukraine come to the U.S., a program that's brought estimated 300 people to the Madison area, including people who are at that protest I saw in reporting. And also, Trump recently suspended military aid to Ukraine, so there are more cuts in spending. So cuts. People are upset.
I'm glad you brought up the science cuts and the research cuts, because there's a rally at the Capitol, a Stand Up for Science rally from noon to 3 today, protesting just those cuts to cancer research, Alzheimer's research, diabetes research, all the science and medical research that's done.
Busy. We've been busy protesting. And it's, again, I mean, it's encouraging for me to see people getting out in the street and making their voices heard, making their grievances known, because representation, actually seeing people out there standing up for what they believe in is so important. It's frustrating to me when I look at these numbers. Doge, I hate that we're calling it that, whatever, is claiming to save roughly $5.5 million in Wisconsin by making these cuts. But then, when you look at the grand scheme of things in government spending, what's $5 million to them, in offices that are genuinely providing vital, critical services, giving people good jobs. The thing that just makes me so upset and so frustrated with all these government cuts is that government jobs, whether it's state or federal, really used to be sort of that pathway to stability, a pathway to a solid middle-class life where you could have a good salary, know that you're going to be able to retire with good benefits, have healthcare. And now there's just so much uncertainty. And Madeline talked about it too, in our conversation about funding cuts, is that fewer students might be looking to go into government jobs because of that uncertainty. And so they're going to go into the private sector and they're only going to study things that make money, quote unquote. It's frustrating. We're shooting ourselves in the foot with all of these cuts in the name of quote unquote savings, but you're not really saving anything that really makes a difference, are you? I don't know. I'm getting frustrated over here.
I saw an analogy. Somebody said that it's like Elon Musk burned down your house and then said, look, all the money I'm saving you on electricity bills.
Yeah.
So,
that's literally it. Literally it.
Yeah, and the feeling that it's indiscriminate, that it's just across the board, and being frustrated at the idea of that our parks are going to have fewer people protecting our federal parks, things that all of us love to enjoy. It's a frightening situation. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the science rally. I think that is so huge. We're such a science research-led city, so I imagine that'll be well attended. And we're a city that has this beautiful spirit of organizing. We're going to talk about another story around community organizing, but before we get to that, let's take a quick break.
Watch the world's biggest tennis stars clash in the California desert at the BNP Paribas Open, live on Tennis Channel.
How do they get to these shots?
Tune in daily for exclusive first ball to last coverage from Indian Wells and witness all of the jaw-dropping action as the game's top men and women square off at one of the greatest events in sports. It's tennis magic you need to see to believe. The BNP Paribas Open, live on Tennis Channel and streaming on the Tennis Channel app.
TaxAct knows small business owners can sometimes use a little help with their taxes. That's why TaxAct has Expert Assist, a team of live tax experts ready to answer any questions you may have. Think of them as your own personal sidekick. Not like one of those funny talking animal sidekicks, more like the super smart nerding out on tax code and business casual attire sidekick, but just as helpful and lovable. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
All right, we're back.
Yeah, so this week marks a very somber anniversary for the Madison community. It's been 10 years since the police killing of Tony Terrell Robinson Jr. And for those who are newer to Madison or don't know the story, here's the shortened version. But please be wary that this story does include talk of police violence and obviously death. So just keep that in mind. On the night of March 6th, 2015, Tony Robinson's friends called 911 in hopes of getting help for Robinson, who had taken mushrooms and was acting erratically over on Willie Street. But instead of getting help, Madison police officer Matthew Kenny showed up to the Willie Street apartment where Robinson was and shot him to death within 20 seconds of arrival. Kenny claimed that Robinson had attacked him when he entered the apartment, prompting him to use his gun, despite the fact that 2 backup officers were literally just seconds away from arriving on the scene. Kenny, a white man, shot Robinson, a black teen, 7 times. Following the shooting, there were weeks of massive protests that happened in Madison. And, I'm talking like thousands of people that were in the street, national media attention, a lot of just sadness and tension throughout the community. At that time, back in 2015, I was a student covering the events of the shooting for the Badger Herald, and I can remember the events of that night and the following weeks very vividly. I remember talking to a lot of Tony's friends who were just sobbing and just beside themselves with grief and just fear at this moment. And it was really, really a staggering moment, I think, for me as a human, and also like coming into my own as a journalist. It was a very hard time for all of us in Madison. I'm curious, Rob, you were in Madison at that time. Do you remember that time?
Well, I remember it very well. I was a feature writer, so I didn't cover much of it, but I remember our reporters were there in the community for weeks and weeks covering it, all the twists and turns of the case, and then kind of the impact it had on the city. And this was, of course, before George Floyd, but I think it really rearranged a lot of people's thinking about our relationship to law enforcement in Madison.
I was here as well. I lived in Madison at that time, and I was on Willie Street that night. I was at Plan B dancing, trying to be joyous, and we got the news, and I just bawled and bawled. And it just seems so inconceivable, but it's actually, unfortunately, more imaginable than we would like to give credit. And then, at the protests, it was just such a moment of people coming together in solidarity, but also just disbelief and disgust that something like this could happen.
Yeah. It was a very sobering time, I think, for our community. And like you said, Bianca, really just like a moment of recognition of like, how could this have happened? But also, of course, this happened because this is the America that we're living in. So, Rob, like you mentioned, there were a lot of twists and turns in this case. Following an investigation, Dane County DA Ismail Ozan announced in May 2015 that he would not press charges against Officer Kenny. And this shocked and angered so many people. And according to reporting from Nicholas Garton over at Madison 365, shout out to Nick, he's a great guy, been on the podcast before. But according to his reporting, during his tenure, Ozan has never found a Madison police officer to have acted unlawfully. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting data point from them. And for other reference, Kenny is still with Madison police today, and Robinson's family hasn't stopped fighting for justice. Robinson's grandmother, Sharon Irwin Henry, she's in the process of launching a complaint against Kenny through the Office of the Independent Monitor, an office that was actually created alongside with the Police Civilian Oversight Board in response to her grandson's death. We've actually had her on the podcast before to tell her story, and, her and her family's strength to keep fighting in the face of such adversity after all these years is beyond admirable to me. They have taken so many different legal fronts to get this case just looked at further by Ozan, by other legal experts. And it's very inspiring to me, the lengths that they've gone through in order to seek justice. And, this week, the community gathered to celebrate Robinson's life and memory once again. There were several community events held in the Willie Street area on Thursday night, including a candlelight vigil outside the home where Robinson was killed, an art and photo exhibit at the Social Justice Center, who has played a pivotal role in supporting Robinson's family after his death, and a few more events happening over there too, over at Cafe Coda, and a documentary screening over at Aubergine. So it's really heartening, again, to see the community come together in support. I wish that we didn't have to for this. it's frustrating. Again, like I said, it's been 10 years and his family has been hosting some sort of gathering, remembrance, candlelight vigils for these past 10 years. You know, there has not been a day that goes by that we don't really think about it. You know, there is hope for the future, though. As I mentioned, Robinson's family is still using all of the legal routes that it has to pursue justice. And the community continues to remember Tony with murals, poetry reading, musical performances, and more. So, you know, his impact, even in death, it's not at all forgotten, wholeheartedly imprinted on the Madison community and beyond.
I'm so grateful that you pulled this history together, Haley, to share with folks, because I'm sure some people listening were not here and don't know about this story. And I think that's exactly the effort that Sharon Irwin Henry and his family want. It's just like, we're not going to forget this. We're like, say his name. This isn't just something that we're going to let fall into the past of history. And also, I just really recommend, and we'll put it in our show notes, folks, listen to the conversation because it was very affecting, and you can hear the strength that she has and everything, you know, many of the measures that they've taken. But yeah, it's a really hard one, but I'm glad that people are still, you know, there's still the people power behind this story.
Yeah, I mean, people haven't stopped talking about it. I mean, at least for me in my circles, like it's a story that I think about constantly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can't go on Willie Street. You can't go on that block without, it's never the same. You know, while we're thinking about Tony Robinson, he was a teenager, you know, he was 19, and taking care of our youth and our teenagers is a really important thing. I think about that a lot. I used to work at a place called the Boys and Girls Club. I used to be a member at this place called the Boys and Girls Club in Baraboo, Wisconsin. And we're going to end this Friday News Roundup with a little bit of news about the Boys and Girls Club, a fun little event that I'll be emceeing this coming Monday, which is truly one of the best events in Madison, if I may biasly say so. The Boys and Girls Club State Youth of the Year event in downtown Madison. And it honors the best and the brightest, 17 teens from regions across Wisconsin compete and just like being great, and they give speeches, basically their pitch on how they want to change the world. They come and tell their story and what they're, you know, the changes that they're trying to impact in the world. And it's got like 11 judges, and people basically get to witness our bright and young stars in the state. And what's really cool is the teens come to Madison, and then they get to go to the state capitol and meet state leaders, like including the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The Attorney General Josh Call makes time for them. They talk with state legislators. It's just a really gorgeous event. And I've emceed it the past 2 years. This is my third year. And it genuinely restores my faith in humanity every single time. You know, I'd be in tears listening to the stories. And also just so proud of, you know, Boys and Girls Club and the space to like actually foster and nurture kids, and kids from all backgrounds and people who don't necessarily come from means or have sort of resources to help support their growth. So I was one of those kids, and I love this event, and shout out to Boys and Girls Club.
I love it. I love ending our week on a little bit of happiness.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as you say, so nourishing and replenishing for the rest of us, and, you know, to see that spark.
Yeah. And it's awesome to hear like some of the state legislators who come and they're like, this is my favorite night of the year. It really is a gorgeous one. So, and this is our favorite day of the week, isn't it, y'all? Thanks for rounding up the news with me. Haley Sperling, appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend.
And you too, Rob Thomas.
Thank you, Bianca.
That's all for today, here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. We're produced by Jade Isiri Ramos and Selena Sia Reynolds. Haley Sperling is our executive producer. Our theme music is by Carl Christensen. Rob Thomas is our newsletter editor. Don't forget, you can always get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to Madison Minutes. And hey, if you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with someone who loves a supper club? Hey, see you back here Monday morning with more news from around the city. Until then, have a great weekend.